The coffee shop buzzed with its usual morning energy as Sarah Martinez settled into her corner table, laptop open, and fingers dancing across the keyboard. She had chosen this spot deliberately, tucked away near the large windows where natural light streamed in, giving her the perfect view of the street while keeping her relatively hidden from the other customers. As a freelance journalist, Sarah had developed a habit of people-watching. It helped her craft better characters for her articles and gave her inspiration for the human interest stories that had made her reputation in the local newspaper circuit. Today felt different, though. There was an electricity in the air that she couldn't quite place her finger on. The bell above the door chimed, and Sarah glanced up from her screen out of habit. 3 men walked in, and immediately, the atmosphere in the coffee shop shifted. They moved with a precision that spoke of military training, shoulders back, eyes constantly scanning, movements economical and purposeful. They wore civilian clothes, but something about them screamed military. The man leading the group caught her attention immediately. Tall, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair cropped short and intelligent gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. There was a quiet authority about him that made other customers unconsciously step aside as the trio approached the counter. Sarah found herself studying him more intently than she usually did with strangers. There was something magnetic about his presence. A confidence that wasn't arrogant, but rather spoke of someone who had faced real danger and survived. She watched as he interacted with the young barista, his voice low and polite, treating the teenager with the same respect he would probably show a commanding officer. The other 2 men with him were clearly subordinates of some kind. They deferred to him subtly, positioning themselves slightly behind and to his sides in a formation that Sarah recognized from military documentaries she had researched for previous articles. These weren't just any soldiers. Their bearings suggested special forces. As they waited for their order, the leader's eyes swept the coffee shop in what appeared to be a casual glance but was clearly a professional assessment of the environment. His gaze passed over Sarah briefly, and she felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Those gray eyes were sharp, missing nothing, and for just a moment she had the unsettling feeling that he had cataloged everything about her in that single look. Sarah pretended to return to her laptop, but she found herself stealing glances at the group as they collected their drinks and moved to a table near the back of the shop. They sat in a configuration that allowed them to watch all entrances, she noticed. Definitely military. And probably not just regular military either. The conversation at their table was conducted in low voices, too quiet for her to overhear, despite her journalist's instincts urging her to try. Their body language suggested they were discussing something serious, not quite tense, but focused in a way that spoke of important business being conducted. Sarah tried to concentrate on her article about the upcoming city council election, but she kept finding her eyes drawn back to the mysterious trio. The leader had removed his light jacket, revealing well-defined forearms and hands that looked like they had seen real work. There was a small scar on his left hand, she noticed, white against his tanned skin. When he stood to refill his coffee, Sarah got a better look at him. He moved with the fluid grace of someone in excellent physical condition. But there was more to it than that. It was the way he carried himself. Alert, but not paranoid. Confident, but not cocky. She had interviewed enough veterans for her stories to recognize the bearing of someone who had served in combat. As he returned to his table, something made him pause. Sarah didn't realize at first what had caught his attention. But then she felt his gaze on her again. This time, when she looked up, their eyes met directly. The intensity of his stare made her breath catch. He wasn't just looking at her. He was studying her with a focus that made her suddenly self-conscious. Sarah realized she had been unconsciously rolling up the sleeves of her cardigan as the morning had grown warmer. The movement had revealed her forearms, including the tattoo that decorated her left arm from wrist to elbow. It was an intricate design that she had gotten years ago. A compass rose intertwined with coordinates and small symbols that held personal meaning. The man's reaction was immediate and startling. His face went completely still, all expression draining from his features. The coffee cup in his hand trembled slightly, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might drop it. His companions noticed the change immediately, following his gaze to Sarah's table. What happened next confused her even more. The leader said something sharp and quiet to his men, and they immediately began gathering their things. But his eyes never left her tattoo, and there was something in his expression that Sarah couldn't identify. Recognition, shock, maybe even fear. Sarah looked down at her arm, wondering what could possibly be so significant about her tattoo. It was personal to her, certainly. But she couldn't imagine why it would cause such a strong reaction in a complete stranger. The coordinates were from a place that held special meaning in her family history, and the compass rose was simply something she had always found beautiful. When she looked up again, the three men were heading for the door. But the leader stopped and turned back, his eyes finding hers one more time. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the coffee shop, and Sarah felt as though he was trying to communicate something urgent without words. Then he was gone, the bell chiming as the door closed behind them. Sarah sat in stunned silence, her heart racing from the intensity of the encounter. She rolled her sleeve back down, suddenly feeling exposed, and tried to return to her work. But concentration was impossible. The barista, a college student named Jake, whom Sarah had chatted with before, approached her table during a lull in customers. "Do you know who those guys were?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Sarah shook her head. "No idea. Why?" The way they carried themselves, and the way the other customers kind of automatically moved out of their way. "I'm pretty sure they were military. Special forces, maybe." Jake lowered his voice. "My brother's in the army, and he says you can always tell the special ops guys. Something about how they move. Did you hear anything they said?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. Jake shook his head. "They were super quiet. But I saw the way that one guy looked at you, like he'd seen a ghost or something. Do you have any idea what that was about?" Sarah touched her covered forearm unconsciously. "None at all." But as Jake returned to his work, and Sarah packed up her laptop, she couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter was far from over. Something about her tattoo had triggered a powerful response in that man, and her journalist's instincts were telling her that this was a story worth investigating. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people. But the SEAL commander, for she was now certain that's what he was, had looked at her tattoo with an expression she had never seen before. It was as if those coordinates and symbols meant something to him, something significant enough to drain the color from his face and send him fleeing from the coffee shop. As Sarah walked to her car, she found herself looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see the gray-eyed stranger following her. The logical part of her mind told her she was being paranoid, but years of investigative work had taught her to trust her instincts. And her instincts were screaming that this chance encounter was anything but chance. She drove home through the familiar streets of her neighborhood. But everything felt different now. The tattoo that had been a personal symbol for so many years suddenly felt like a beacon, marking her for reasons she didn't understand. Whatever had caused that man's reaction, Sarah knew with certainty that she needed to find out what it was. That evening, as she researched military units and tried to identify the men from the coffee shop, Sarah couldn't escape the feeling that her quiet life as a freelance journalist had just taken a dramatic turn. The question was whether she was ready for whatever came next. Sarah spent the next 2 days trying to push the encounter out of her mind, but it proved impossible. Every time she looked at her tattoo, she found herself wondering what the gray-eyed stranger had seen in it that had shaken him so profoundly. Her attempts at research had yielded nothing useful. Without knowing his name or unit, finding information about a specific military officer was like searching for a needle in a haystack. On Thursday morning, she returned to the same coffee shop, telling herself it was just her regular routine, but she found herself scanning every face that entered, hoping and dreading in equal measure that she might see him again. Jake noticed her distraction when she ordered her usual latte. "Still thinking about those military guys?" he asked with a knowing grin. Sarah shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious, I guess. It's not every day something like that happens." "Well, if you're that curious, you might want to talk to the guy who just walked in," Jake said, nodding toward the entrance. "He's been asking about you." Sarah's heart skipped as she turned, But it wasn't the SEAL commander. Instead, a man in his 50s, wearing a rumpled suit and carrying a worn leather briefcase, approached her table. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent years outdoors, with graying hair and intelligent brown eyes that held a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Miss Martinez?" he said, extending a hand. "My name is Frank Torres. I was hoping I could have a word with you." Sarah's journalist instincts immediately went on high alert. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" Torres glanced around the coffee shop, then back at her. "Not exactly. But I believe you had an encounter the other day with some military personnel. Specifically, a Navy SEAL commander named Marcus Reed." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. So, she had been right about him being Special Forces. "How do you know about that?" "You know, because Commander Reed came to see me right after he left this coffee shop," Torres said, settling into the chair across from her without invitation. "He was quite shaken. Actually, said he had seen something that shouldn't exist." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to cover her tattoo. Torres opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Miss Martinez, I'm going to share some information with you that is going to sound impossible, but I need you to listen carefully, because your safety may depend on it." "My safety?" Sarah's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from other customers. Torres gestured for her to keep her voice down. 12 years ago, I was part of a classified operation in Syria," Torres began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was a CIA operative working with a joint task force that included Commander Reed's SEAL team. The mission was to locate and extract a deep-cover agent who had gone dark." Sarah leaned forward despite herself, caught up in the story. "What does this have to do with me?" Torres opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was grainy and appeared to have been taken from a distance, but it clearly showed a woman with dark hair sitting at an outdoor cafe. Sarah's breath caught. The woman looked remarkably like her, but what made her stomach drop was the tattoo visible on the woman's forearm. It was identical to her own. "This is Isabella Chen," Torres said quietly. "The agent we were sent to extract. She had been undercover for 3 years, posing as an art dealer while gathering intelligence on weapons trafficking routes through the region." Sarah stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. "This is impossible. That's my tattoo. I designed it myself." "The coordinates," Torres said, pointing to a section of the tattoo in the photo. Sarah's mouth felt dry. "They're from a place in northern Syria where my grandfather was stationed during his military service. He used to tell me stories about the landscape there, how beautiful it was despite the conflict. When I got the tattoo, I included those coordinates as a way to honor his memory." Torres nodded grimly. "Those same coordinates mark the location of a safe house that our operation used during the extraction mission." Isabella Chen claimed she had chosen them randomly when she created her cover identity's tattoo. "But when Commander Reed saw your tattoo the other day, he realized that wasn't possible." Quote, "I don't understand," Sarah said, though a cold dread was beginning to build in her stomach. "Isabella Chen disappeared during the extraction," Torres continued. "The safe house was compromised, and when Reed's team arrived, they found evidence of a struggle, but no body. She vanished completely, along with crucial intelligence about a major weapons shipment that was supposed to move through those coordinates." Sarah looked at the photograph again, studying the woman's face more carefully. There were similarities beyond the tattoo. The shape of the eyes, the way she held her shoulders, but it was impossible. "You think I'm her? That's crazy. I've lived here my entire life. I have records, a birth certificate, school transcripts." "We know," Torres said. "We've already checked. Sarah Martinez is real. Born here 28 years ago, attended local schools, graduated from the state university with a degree in journalism. Your records are completely legitimate." "Then what are you saying?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "There are only a few possibilities," None of them. Good. Either Isabella Chen somehow assumed your identity after disappearing, or someone is using your likeness and personal information to continue her cover, or... He trailed off. Or what? Or Isabella Chen never existed, and the woman we thought we were extracting was actually you, somehow displaced in time and place in ways we don't understand. Sarah laughed, but it came out hollow and forced. That's insane. You're talking about science fiction. Torres pulled out another photograph, this one showing her tattoo in close detail. Commander Reed took this photo of your arm from across the coffee shop. The detail is remarkable. Every line, every symbol, every coordinate matches exactly. Not similar, not close. Exact. Sarah studied the photo, comparing it to her own arm. He was right. It was perfect match. Down to a small imperfection in one of the compass points that had occurred when the tattoo artist's hand had slipped slightly. There's more, Torres said, his voice growing even quieter. Isabella Chen had a distinctive scar on her left shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. She claimed it was from a childhood accident. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She had exactly that scar, from when she had fallen from a tree at age 7 and caught her shoulder on a broken branch. It was barely visible now, faded with time, but the shape was unmistakable. This is impossible, she whispered. Torres reached across the table and touched her hand gently. I know how this sounds, but Commander Reed risked his career to bring this to my attention because he believes something very dangerous is happening. The intelligence that Isabella Chen was carrying when she disappeared contained information about a terrorist cell that is still active. If someone is using your identity to continue her mission, you think I'm in danger. I think you're at the center of something much bigger than either of us understands, Torres said. And I think the people who made Isabella Chen disappear 12 years ago may have just realized she's still alive. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. You want me to come with you? To talk to this Commander Reed? Torres nodded. He's the only person who can identify Isabella Chen for certain. If you're her, he'll know. And if you're not. He paused. Then we need to figure out why someone has created a perfect duplicate of an operative who was supposed to be dead. Sarah looked around the coffee shop, at the familiar faces and comfortable routine she had known for years. Everything felt surreal, as if she had stepped into someone else's life without realizing it. What if I refuse? She asked. Torres's expression grew serious. Then you go home, and you pretend this conversation never happened. But Miss Martinez, if the people who killed Isabella Chen's handler and compromised that safe house 12 years ago discover that she's alive or that someone is impersonating her, they won't hesitate to eliminate the farce. Threat. Sarah thought about the gray-eyed commander and the shock in his expression when he had seen her tattoo. She thought about the photograph of Isabella Chen and the impossible similarities between them. Most of all, she thought about the coordinates on her arm that had seemed so personal and innocent just a few days ago. If I go with you, she said finally, what happens then? Then we find out the truth, Torres said. Whatever it is. Sarah finished her coffee, her hands shaking slightly as she set down the cup. Okay, she said quietly. Let's go find out who I really am. As they left the coffee shop together, Sarah caught Jake watching them with concern. She managed a small wave, wondering if she would ever see this place again. The comfortable, predictable life of freelance journalist Sarah Martinez was over. Whether the woman in those photographs was her or not, the truth was waiting, and Sarah had the unsettling feeling that once she found it, there would be no going back to the safety of watching other people's stories from across a crowded coffee shop. The safe house was located in an industrial district 30 minutes outside the city, tucked between a defunct auto parts warehouse and a storage facility that had seen better days. Torres had driven in silence most of the way, leaving Sarah alone with her churning thoughts and growing anxiety. Every mile that passed felt like another step away from her normal life, and deeper into a mystery that seemed to grow more impossible by the hour. Commander Marcus Reed was waiting for them in a sparsely furnished room on the second floor. When Sarah walked in, his reaction was immediate and intense. He stood so quickly that his chair scraped against the concrete floor, and for a moment he simply stared at her as if she were a ghost. "Jesus," he breathed, running a hand through his dark hair. "It really is her." "Her meaning Isabella Chen?" Torres asked, closing the door behind them. Reed nodded slowly, his gray eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "But that's not possible. I saw her die, Frank. I was there when the safe house was hit. Guessness. 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 Guessness." Sarah felt the room spin slightly. "What do you mean? You saw her die?" Reed looked at Torres, who nodded encouragingly. "The extraction went wrong," Reed said, his voice heavy with old grief. "We arrived at the coordinates to find the safe house under attack. Isabella was trapped on the second floor. I tried to reach her, but the building was collapsing from explosive damage." He paused, clearly reliving painful memories. "I saw her at the window, and she threw something to me before the floor gave way. The whole structure came down. We searched for hours, but there was no way anyone could have survived that collapse." "What did she throw to you?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Reed walked to a desk in the corner and opened a locked drawer. He pulled out a small object, wrapped in cloth, and handed it to her. Sarah unwrapped it to reveal a silver pendant in the shape of a compass rose, identical to the centerpiece of her tattoo. "She wore this around her neck," Reed said quietly. "It was the only proof we had that she had been there at all." Sarah stared at the pendant, her hands trembling. She reached into her shirt and pulled out her own necklace, an identical compass rose that had belonged to her grandmother, or so she had always believed. Torres whistled low. "Two identical pendants. That's quite a coincidence." "There's no such thing as coincidence in this business," Reed said grimly. "Frank, we need to run a full identity verification. Fingerprints, DNA, the works." Sarah found her voice. "Wait, before we do anything else, I need answers. If Isabella Chen died 12 years ago, then who am I? And how do I have all her personal items and her memories?" Reed and Torres exchanged glances. "What memories?" Torres asked carefully. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind, even as the rational part of her rejected what she was thinking. "The coordinates on my tattoo. My grandfather never served in Syria. I remember getting that tattoo, but I can't remember why I chose those specific numbers. They just felt right." She looked around the room, noting details that seemed oddly familiar, despite never having been there before. "And this place. I feel like I've been here before, but I know that's impossible." Reed sat down heavily. Isabella had what we called perfect recall for mission details, but she claimed she had no memory of her life before joining the agency. We assumed it was a psychological defense mechanism, a way of protecting her real identity while undercover. "What if it wasn't?" Sarah said quietly. "What if something happened during that extraction that separated her memories from her physical existence somehow?" Torres shook his head. "You're talking about something beyond current science. So is a woman dying in a building collapse and then showing up 12 years later with no knowledge of her own death?" Reed pointed out. Sarah walked to the window, looking out at the industrial landscape. "There's something else. Ever since I was a child, I've had dreams about places I've never been, markets in foreign countries, conversations in languages I don't speak but somehow understand. I always thought they were just products of an overactive imagination." "Isabella spoke 4 languages fluently," Reed said, "and she had an uncanny ability to blend into any environment." "Can you do that?" Without thinking, Sarah answered him in what she suddenly realized was fluent Arabic, then switched to French. The words came naturally, as if she had always known them, but she had no memory of learning either language. Torres pulled out his phone. "I'm calling our lab. We need those test results immediately." While Torres made his call, Reed approached Sarah at the window. I have to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Sarah nodded, though her entire world felt like it was shifting beneath her feet. The night of the extraction, Isabella told me something. She said that if anything happened to her, I should look for a woman with her face who wouldn't know who she really was. She said the compass rose would find its way back to me when the time was right. Sarah's breath caught. She knew this would happen. She seemed to think it was a possibility. Isabella was working on something bigger than just the weapons trafficking case. She had discovered evidence of experiments, government black projects involving memory manipulation and identity transfer. The room felt like it was closing in around Sarah. You think I'm the result of some kind of experiment? I think Isabella Chen found a way to preserve herself beyond physical death, Reed said quietly. And I think she's been waiting 12 years for us to find her again. Torres ended his call and turned back to them. The lab will have preliminary results in an hour. But there's something else you both need to know. 20 minutes ago, 3 men were asking questions about Sarah Martinez at her apartment building. The description matches the terrorist cell that killed Isabella's original handler. Reed was instantly alert. They've found her, or they've found me, Sarah corrected. Whatever the truth is, they're not going to wait for us to figure it out. Reed moved to another desk and began pulling out weapons and communication equipment. Then, we need to disappear until we have answers. Sarah, do you have anywhere safe you can go? Family, friends, who live far from here. Sarah shook her head. My parents are dead, and I don't have any close family. All my friends are local. My. Then you're coming with us, Reed said decisively. Frank, what's our best option for a secure location? Torres was already gathering files from around the room. There's a cabin in the mountains about 3 hours north. Off the grid. Defensible. And stocked for extended stays. As they prepared to leave, Reed handed Sarah a pistol. Do you know how to use this? Sarah took the weapon, and her hands automatically checked the safety and magazine with movements that felt natural, despite her having no memory of learning them. Apparently I do. Reed and Torres stared at her. Sarah, Reed said. Carefully. You just performed a weapons check that takes most people months to learn properly. Sarah looked down at the gun in her hands, then back at the 2 men who represented her only link to understanding what was happening to her. I think Isabella Chen is trying to tell us something. The question is whether we're ready to listen. Torres's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it quickly, his face paling. The lab results are in. Sarah, your fingerprints match Isabella Chen's exactly. But your DNA is completely different. That's impossible, Reed said. Sarah felt a strange calm settling over her as the pieces finally came together. No, it's not. Isabella Chen found a way to transfer her memories, her skills, her very essence into a new body. She preserved everything that made her who she was and embedded it into someone else. She looked at Reed with new understanding. She chose me because I was already similar enough to pass for her physically. But she waited 12 years to activate those memories, waiting for the right moment when her original mission could be completed. Reed holstered his weapon and shouldered his pack. Then we better figure out what that mission was. Because I have a feeling our enemies already know exactly what they're looking for. As they left the safe house and disappeared into the growing darkness, Sarah felt the last vestiges of her old life slipping away. Whether she was Sarah Martinez or Isabella Chen, or some impossible combination of both, one thing was clear. The woman who had watched quietly from coffee shop corners was gone forever. In her place stood someone with the skills of a trained operative, the memories of a life she had never lived, and a mission that had been 12 years in the making. The gray-eyed SEAL commander had been right to go silent when he saw her tattoo. It wasn't just a mark of identity. It was a signal that the dead had returned to finish what they had started. And Sarah Martinez, whoever she really was, intended to see that mission through to the end.